Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Business Podcast, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at @AskAdamTorres. Keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have Heather Naylor on the line, and she's the CEO over at Closet Cash and also host of House of Her podcast. Heather, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, man, I'm doing fantastic, and I'm excited to get into your podcast, House of Her. I mean, I love supporting other podcasters and also and building the podcast community. But before we get into the podcast, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming launch you have of Closet Cash. Tell us a little bit more about the company and brand, please.
So Closet Cash is basically a sustainable reseller of luxury goods. So we're kind of, we do high-end items like purses, jewelry, watches, clothing, shoes, men and women's fashion, and lightly worn that we basically allow for consignment on the site. Sometimes we'll buy out products. The majority of what we do is consignment, where somebody literally ships us their clothing or shoes or a purse, and we will photograph it, catalog it, do all the copywriting to make sure that it's properly tagged so that people can find it online if they're doing a Google shopping search. And then we will sell it, and we pay the highest price of any other online retailer. So we pay up to 90% back to the consignor, which is unheard of. Nobody does that. So there's a few other people doing what I do, but I pay the most.
Wow, that's exciting. So you have to tell me, so how did you get into this business? Because it's such a unique niche.
It's funny. So I actually, I guess it kind of started with, I never really could afford designer clothes. I had been, living in Forever 21 and saving all my money. And I used to wait tables, and I was going to school at UCLA, and I had, pretty hefty student loans. So just the thought of having, a Gucci bag just never even entered my mind. It was just there's no way. But occasionally, if I wanted something kind of cool, I would go to these, places like Buffalo Exchange or Crossroads and, sometimes even thrift stores, and I would, buy something used that, made me feel like I was getting something because I didn't really have the money to buy something new. And I think from there, it was just always oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could, one day afford, a Gucci coat or, maybe a Chanel bag. And it just seemed so out of reach. And then finally, I think that as I became more entrepreneurial and I started making more money, I felt like, hey, this is maybe doable. And there were sites that were coming up. eBay had been around for a long time. You had back in the day, Amazon was kind of doing some, resale.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have a bunch of different online resale sites that basically do this, and they do it, on a large scale. So you don't really have to go to that Buffalo Exchange anymore and dig through a bunch of racks. You can pretty much search for something and find it online. And I kind of got into it because I was just pissed off. I felt like as somebody that started selling their own clothes, I was getting pennies on the dollar for my stuff. And it was I'm kind of realizing, okay, so the person that's making money is the website. So when I would consign things, there's a few different companies I went to where I sent them my clothes and I felt pretty good about it. And then when all is said and done, I'm making $10 off of an item that cost me a couple $100. And that's because what they don't tell you is that, a lot of these consignment sites will take your clothes, they'll price them. They're not going to always tell you what they're going to price them at. Most sites don't. They just have free reign to price it how they want. Then it goes live on the site before you even really know when it's up. Then they offset a promo code on the consignor, and then at the end of it, they 1099 you, or they W-9 you. So you get a 1099 at the end of the year. So you're not getting a great commission split. A lot of these sites only give you maybe 40%. And then you're getting a promo code offset to you, which is another 20% off your earnings. And then in addition to that, you're getting, a nice 1099. Yeah. So it's like, and that was weird to me because there's one company, and I won't say who, but there's one company that just started doing this because they went public. And I felt like that was a real, like, just kind of like bad move to their clients, because their clients are really their consigners. And when you sell a car, you don't get like a 1099 from CarMax. It's like, hey, you just sold a car. It's not income. It's actually what I look at as a personal item. So when you buy a personal item, like, a purse or, a skirt, that's like something that you essentially would consider a loss. It's like you can't really consider that income. And when we W-9 people and you get a 1099, that's because it's supposed to be income. Like you actually, it's earnings of some sort, whether it be in the form of a settlement for like back wages, or it be, capital gains because you sold some stocks. Even though you weren't technically working and your stocks made you money, you paid capital gain on those earnings. And so it's just, to me, it was very strange that they would go out and start, W-9ing people. And at that point, that's when I started the company, because I was like, you know what? I finally did make it to that point in my life where I can afford nice things. And, it's really upsetting. Like, I just felt I felt taken advantage of, and like kind of just like angry that like I trusted these companies, and it really only happened with like one company really bad. That's also the company that W-9s people. But
I'll tell you what, these are my favorite businesses that get started. It's the ones where somebody's solving a problem and or an experience that they had as a consumer, or just, a need that they're trying to solve. And then that's where the business is rooted, because I feel like the founders of those companies usually have so much passion for what they do that it's just that little extra thing that keeps them in the game, and that pushes the business over to be successful. And I know, and when this does get launched, by the way, so when Closet Cash does get launched, I'm gonna definitely have you back on the podcast. We're gonna get more into it. We're gonna we'll definitely put the link, try and get you some traffic in the show notes. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on your podcast. So House of Her. I mean, tell us a little bit more about the podcast and what listeners can expect, please.
Yeah, well, it's so fun talking to you because you're like the master of podcasts. But it is basically, a female empowerment podcast. Our topics include, business, finance, fertility, career advancement, and self-improvement. The majority of our interviewees are women, but we do have men on the show too. It's really all about education. So like one of my favorite interviews was we had a doctor on to educate women about fertility, and there's all these things in the media right now that you're hearing, like, oh, pregnant at 50 and, a baby at 45. And it's just like, these are really, like, unfortunately, in my opinion, slightly irresponsible articles. And that press leads women to believe they have more time than they really do. And I actually kind of thought that I had more time than I do because of that. And so having him on the podcast really kind of was not just like a great lesson for me, but for everybody to know exactly like what you can expect, what are some of like the numbers and like when fertility tends to decline. And, at the end of it, like, it was so great because he gave us a really simple solution. It's like at any point, if you want to know, like, okay, how many eggs do I have, or am I fertile? Like, it's an ultrasound, which can usually be done for a couple $100, and a consultation with your doctor. And that'll kind of let you know what you've got going on. And I think it's hard for women because for us, it's just, there's so much out there. Like, we're worried about our nails and our hair, and we're worried about aging in our skin. And then, like, we forget, like, there's things that get, like, I totally forgot, like, oh, yeah, like, my fertility is, like, probably something I should think about. So this kind of keeps me on track, and it allows me to, like, constantly be educating myself, constantly be bettering myself, because life gets in the way, and, things happen. Maybe you have kids and you're so distracted. And I kind of like doing this because I get to just learn something every day, be empowered by all these amazing people around me, especially women. Like, I feel so incredibly proud of every like woman that I've had on the podcast. It blows my mind like that I get to sit down and talk to these amazing women, and like having that interaction just fuels me and makes me want to do better and be better and, you know, just learn. So,
and can you talk about how much fun it is? Because I want you to do the public service announcement right now about leave all the seriousness behind. Just tell everybody how much fun you have with it and why everybody out there should go start a podcast. I tell people all the time, it's the greatest thing.
It's so much fun. Like, honestly, I'm an extrovert, so I derive and, like, you know, kind of like develop my energy from being around people. So it comes very natural to me. And I can imagine that for some people, they might be a little nervous about it, but it's really interesting. Like, once you're in the room, and like we do these interviews one-on-one, and like right now, like we don't videotape anything. It's just a mic, and it's just me and Gina, who's the executive producer, and my guest. And it's intimate and it's fun. And it's like, once like they start talking, the cool thing that I noticed for me is that they start to realize how cool they are and how smart they are. And it's like, you know, because you do your job every day, and like I'm asking questions, and a lot of these women are like, oh yeah, like, well, I do that because of this. And then I'll ask another question. And then as they're starting to talk about what they do and what their passion is, or this new product that they created, they start to like kind of take a minute, and I see it almost in every interview where they're like, I'm a badass.
That's so good.
It's so fun to see that. And it's like, I get to kind of like do that with them. And then like, I'll take a minute. I'll be like,
do you ever tell them that? You're like, you're like, yeah, you're a badass. I just saw you.
oh, totally. Like, honestly, it's so funny because there's like a few, you know, I'm like not great at this. I literally do the audio myself, and I'm like, basically like I have my mic and like I'm connecting it to GarageBand, and sometimes like I'll hit the space bar and it won't stop. So like you'll hear a little bit of like a discussion after. Like, I think there's 2 or 3 podcasts that are on the website like this. And
and for everybody listening, I'm glad you shared that, Heather. No, because for everybody listening, I'm like, just do it anyway. It's still worth it. It's still so much fun. Yeah. It's still great content. My first 300 episodes were on my iPhone headphones, so I don't want anybody out there that's like, oh, I gotta blah blah blah. I'm always like, and I mean, I teach people how to do this stuff, and I always tell them like, yeah, I get it. But if you're gonna plan your podcast for a year, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. I mean, it's boring. I mean, we still don't have any listeners. How about you just record something and put it out there and see if we can get some subscribers, and then we can up the quality and up everything else. But build something first.
Isn't that the truth? It's so easy to be like, oh, like I don't want to do it yet. Oh, I need this. Like, I should buy a really good mic, and like, oh, I should buy lighting equipment. And it's like, honestly, in my life, the only thing that's made me successful has honestly been the fact that I'm kind of a doer, and if I want to do something, I do it, and I just start it, you know? There's definitely been times where I'm going to, like, you know, I'll have a project where I'm going to, like, you know, stitch some cool, like, patch on my shirt, and it never happens, and it just sits in my closet forever, but 90% of the time.
But now you're starting a company around clothes, so you still got to it.
Yes, there you go. It's like,
you one-upped yourself. You one-upped yourself.
I love that you have this, like, amazing platform to like teach people how to do this, because honestly, the one thing that is also really fun is how much validation and like happiness it brings. Just like every interview, every interaction, there's like this level of like, oh my God, like that felt really good. It's like going to the gym. It's like feeding your brain in a way. And it's also like being an amazing human. I feel like it's unfortunate, you know, that, you know, we live in this world where things are capitalized, like, you know, and what I mean is like the basis of what you do has to have some financial gain. And, you know, if you're not making money, it's like, don't bother writing songs. And if you're not, you know, selling your art, then don't bother writing it. It's like, there's so many things in life that literally really are like free, and sometimes like even might cost you money to do them, and they're going to be the most fulfilling thing, you know, like
I love it.
Having a baby, like costs money, but everybody always says it's the most fulfilling thing, So the House of Her is like my baby.
I love it. That's great. So Heather, that being said, if I know Closet Cash, we're going to get you back on the show once that's launched, and we'll give all the info for that. But for now, until that's launched, number one, how do people? A two-part question. How do people follow you, and where can they find the podcast, please?
Okay, so you can follow us at House of Her Podcast on Instagram. So we have like an Instagram, and you can direct message us there if you want to do an interview. Once again, that's just House of Her Podcast, all one word. And, we're on Spotify and iTunes. On iTunes, what you would do is just kind of go into the search tab looking for a new podcast and just type in House of Her, and it should be the first one that shows up. We got like a black and pink logo, very like punk rock looking logo that I drew with my fingertip on my iPhone.
Which looks great, and I didn't know she totally did. I'm like, oh my gosh, I like your logo, and you're like, yeah, I did it on my iPhone. I'm like, okay, well, thank you, Heather. Okay, gosh.
DIY, it takes me back to like my punk days.
That's awesome.
Who's the producer of the podcast? We've been friends for like 15 years. We used to play in a punk band together. We used to be in.
Get out of here.
Yeah, we were in a female-fronted tribute band for the Ramones. So.
Oh my gosh,
that's
the stories. That's a whole nother episode there.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole, you two have stories, I'm sure. That's a whole nother episode. Well, hey, Heather, it's been awesome having you on the podcast today. Everybody listening, definitely go check out Heather's podcast. As you can see, it's going to be fun. It's inspiring, putting out great content. So House of Her, go check that out on Spotify or on Apple, iTunes. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you had a lot of fun listening to this, because we sure had fun making this for you. If you did, don't forget, subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review on the Apple iTunes store. And if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Business, definitely give us a subscribe there, but also leave us some comments in the video section. Let us know what you thought. Let us know what kind of business that you're running and what kind of things you're up to. Definitely want to keep the conversation going in the YouTube community. And Heather, thanks again for coming on the show.